All right, sounds good. Excited to be here today. I want to say thanks to Boyd and the team at SBX for inviting me down. I'll be talking mostly about a little bit more about what's been happening on the policy side at the federal level, some of the challenges the industry's facing. So first off, a little background on myself and my organization. I'm the executive director of Vote Hemp. We're a policy group that's been working to change the laws to bring back hemp as a commercial crop for quite a few years. Here, I'm going to try it. All right. Okay. So, like I said, we're a nonprofit group. We were founded in 2000. That was our goal. We worked on the first industrial hemp farm bill with Farm Act with Representative Ron Paul from Texas, 2005. That's gives you a little bit of idea how long we've been. This process has been going on. Eventually got a Senate companion bill in 2012 with Senator Wyden from Oregon, and then in 2013, a representative from Colorado, who's now the governor, Representative Polis, put together an amendment to the farm bill that became the 2014 farm bill that allowed for university research. We helped to get that passed. That was a huge vote for us. We got 225 votes. You need 218 to get it passed, and it was a good bipartisan vote. Anyways, that really sparked things, right? Commissioner Comer, who was the agriculture commissioner in Kentucky at the time, saw that, contacted Senator McConnell, started the wheels rolling, and they managed to make some changes to the bill in the process, and included departments of agriculture and research and some other things that really opened this up and allowed for what started out in 2014 as the first sort of cultivation of hemp in the modern era. And so we've continued to work on the 2018 Farm Bill. We've worked with a lot of the states, including extensively here in Tennessee. One of my former employees, Colleen Cahey, did a lot of work on that. So there we go. All right. So, hemp, we have come a long way with this, but this is an old crop. One of our previous speakers mentioned that it's old and yet new, right? So we have lost a lot in the process, though, right? We came 50, 60 years without growing it. All the genetics were lost. Most of the farmers who knew how to grow it. So we're kind of starting over, and we're not yet, it's agriculture once again. Now that the 2018 Farm Bill has been passed, it's clearly been removed from the Controlled Substances Act, and it's part of agriculture under USDA. We still got a ways to go to get this to be, what it will become as a commodity crop. All right. So what are some of these new regulations? 2020, with the USDA passing these regulations or issuing the regulations in October of last year, we're looking at a lot of change coming up. Some of the states are going with the 2014 Farm Bill program. I believe that's what's happening here in Tennessee and Kentucky as well. I think there's quite a few states that are going that route because of the challenges with the USDA regulations. But by next year, we're going to have to see everybody go to the new program. So USDA mostly tried to follow the roadmap that Congress gave them, but there's definitely, it's a complex piece, and they didn't get everything right. There was definitely some interference by the Drug Enforcement Agency in the process. They weren't really supposed to be a regulator on this, but they have been. USDA has been deferring to them, and even the Drug Czar's office has been involved. So that's a challenge we're facing, and we're going to have to continue to work with USDA and the Congress to push this thing forward. So make sure that the industry can be successful. All right. So what are some of the good things? USDA got these regs out pretty quickly. They did it in less than 9 months for a big project like this. That's not easy. They're helping to provide some more clarity about how this is going to be regulated going forward. There's already a mention of crop insurance. It's coming. It's not perfect, but it's a step forward. Exports weren't affected. We also got a confirmation from USDA about transportation, interstate transportation. There's still some challenges with that, but the law clearly says that you can transport interstate legally. So, and then I mentioned that the 2014 program is still in play. Okay, so the interim final rule, here's some of the concerns that we focused on, Vote Hemp focused on in our comments. Obviously the number one issue is THC, right? They've moved to this new standard that involves not just measuring Delta-9, but a combination of the THC acid and the Delta-9. And so what we noted was that they included something really fortunate, we think, called the measurement of uncertainty. It's really a margin of error. And so in the testing process, for example, if you go into a lab, there's going to be some variation. Each time they test it, it's not going to be exact. And so they accounted for that. But what they didn't account for was the sampling margin of error. If you go out into a field, their sampling process says in a 1 acre field, you're going to pull one plant out of that field. Well, we all know the variation in these genetics. And in fact, we worked with the Institute of Advanced Learning and Research in Virginia to get some data to back this up, and I'll show that in a minute. But basically, there's a significant variation in that field population. So we're urging the USDA to account for that, thereby giving us a wider range of what they are calling the acceptable THC level. So 0.3 is the limit, but with the measurement of uncertainty, it provides us margin of error around that. We think it should be a little wider once they account for this sampling error, and we hope that they will. Also, the sampling procedure, they want to take the top third of the plant. We got the same institute did some testing to show they cut up the plants into 3 sections, top, middle, and bottom, and they tested the THC levels. Well, what did they find? Of course, the bottom has the lowest THC, middle a little higher, and the top is where the most of it is concentrated. So in order to have fair sampling that gives an accurate average THC level, you've got to sample the whole plant and homogenize that. So we urge that. And the other thing is this window. Annie mentioned that here in Tennessee you have a 30-day window. We think that's pretty reasonable. We actually asked for more than that because of various factors. But in any case, we asked for 45 days because there's a testing process. They're requiring DEA registered labs. There's only a few of those out there. We don't want a farmer to have to harvest their crop before they know if it's hot. It's bad enough if your crop is going to be disposed of, but then to have to pay for harvesting and then find out after you're done that now you've got to destroy it, that's unacceptable. So one thing that's positive on the disposal of non-compliant plants, the USDA just announced yesterday that they are allowing a broader range of things. Originally it said you had to do it per the Controlled Substances Act. Now they've got a number of different recommended things that will help to make that a simpler process. DEA registered laboratories, we think that that's totally unnecessary. They did defer for 1 year that requirement so that instead of this season having to have a DEA registered lab, fortunately that's not in place until next year. But we'd still like to see them just get rid of that completely. It doesn't add anything in terms of quality, it just makes it more difficult for the lab and it's going to make it more expensive for the tests. The negligent violation, Annie mentioned that as well. They essentially set it at a number. Well, negligence isn't a number, it's something that you do, so we think negligence should be determined by the facts, not by a number. So if your crop goes a little hot and it's 0.51, it shouldn't be that you've got a negligent violation just because it went that hot. Also limiting the felony ban. Unfortunately, they included a felony ban in the law that said that anyone with a drug felony within the past 10 years was not eligible. And we encouraged Congress to limit that only to the to license holder and not to others within it. We wanted them to get rid of it completely, but they didn't do that. And we're encouraging USDA to do that. And in addition to that, we're also asking them to issue a revised IFR. I don't know if they're going to do that, but we think they should do that right away to give more certainty to producers and as well as to the state regulators because they're going to have to adapt again for next year. So this is the research I mentioned that the Institute for Advanced Learning and Research did. They showed they checked the THC levels in the top, middle, and bottom there. You can see that the range as it goes down on that. And then this was the bottom one shows the total THC distribution on plants within the same field. And you can see there's a pretty significant variation in there. So we know that variation's there. They've got to take account for that and put that into the measurement of uncertainty. So lack of labs. We talked about DEA registered labs. This is a nice graphic that New Frontier put out. All the states in gray have no DEA registered labs. Many of them only have 1 or 2, and a lot of those labs are not commercial labs that are oriented towards providing fast turnaround and working with the industry. So we've got a significant problem here with the lack of those labs, and it can take 9 months or a year to get registered, and then you've got all these additional requirements. You're essentially treating everything that's in there as if it's a controlled substance or a drug. So pilot programs, we talked about all the states that opted out. You can see all the ones in gray here. This is constantly sort of churning, updating with USDA, so this is maybe a week or 2 old. It could have changed a bit. But all the states that are in gray there have opted to go with a 2014 Farm Bill program, including all the major ones: Colorado, Oregon, Kentucky, Tennessee it was still listed when I printed this, Annie, as having submitted a plan, but I understand that you guys are not, you're doing 2014, is that correct? Right. Okay, just want to make sure. So anyways, that was what I was, this piece had when I got it. So in any case, you can see it's a variation there. Some states have submitted plans. There's about 6 that have already gotten approved. So biomass prices, somebody already talked about this. This is another little chart, but just showing the path from, where we were at $4 when everybody was really excited about this market to where we are today in the low 70s, even the high 60s cents. So FDA regulation, this is one of our biggest challenges, right? So because the market right now, the thing that's driving this, as everybody knows, is the extracts. And the FDA has been the thing that's the biggest factor here, right? So what a lot of people don't realize is that, if you're producing a food or a dietary supplement, there are existing federal regulations around that. You have to register your facility. You have to use current good manufacturing practices. There's labeling requirements. Anybody that's involved in the manufacturing of these or processing should be aware of that. FDA has said that these products aren't legal, but their basis for that claim is just not accurate. So basically, the only thing that holds this back, the only reason they have to say this is that there was a drug application for a product from called Epidiolex from a company called GW Pharmaceuticals. That product is pure CBD, derived from marijuana, and that's an apple. And then we got a hemp extract that's got all these different compounds in it. That's an orange. Those are 2 different things. So the law says you can't market the same thing if it's already been put out as a drug. But my opinion, obviously this hasn't been litigated or whatever. I think we're talking about 2 different substances there. So FDA's claim on this is wrong. And I've got some positive news in a second. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the biggest thing you don't want to do is to make what they call unqualified health claims. You don't want to say this cures a disease or it treats a disease. I realize that a lot of people are using these products in that way. And it makes it a little bit difficult, but basically FDA says when it comes to a product like that, you have to have like a science-based study, and you have to go to them with that claim and your evidence in order to try to make a claim like that. So you can't just do it because of anecdotal evidence. So let's see here. I also mentioned they've sent out some letters on that, and they held a hearing last May with a lot of comments. So what's holding us back now? We've kind of got this perfect storm. There was 2 things that happened in the past year. One was this vaping crisis, right? We had a lot of people that started getting sick from vapes, and they didn't know what was happening. Seems like they've determined now it was vitamin E acetate that was causing the problem. But that definitely put a hit on a lot of people stopped vaping because of the concern, not understanding which products were safe and which weren't. So that was part of it. And then the FDA put a statement out in November that threw a lot of cold water onto this, onto our market. They essentially said there wasn't enough research, but then they started citing concerns about things that they didn't have any research to prove yet, like liver toxicity, which there is evidence of at very high level doses of CBD, much higher than what the typical products are on the market, that there could be a potential risk there. And then in addition to that, about drug interactions. So we need more data on this, but the FDA also should not be sticking its head in the sand and pretending like these products aren't on the market and that there aren't millions of Americans using them. So there's the statement I mentioned, some of the things that they were specifically talking about, that just happened. And that really, a lot of mainstream retailers put the brakes on their plans to roll out products, thereby cutting back on the market, and some of these processors thought they were going to sell into, and that's what's part of what's happening here. So I just attended an event in Washington, D.C. the other day, the NASDA Winter Conference. It's the Department of Agriculture's all get together for their policy conference. And they had several speakers, one of the Secretary of USDA, as well as the Secretary from FDA, a new guy named Dr. Stephen Hahn. And he made a nice statement about CBD. He talked about how when he walked into the airport at Washington, D.C., he saw a CBD store. And he walked over and he couldn't believe the huge range of products. And it made him realize, how widely these are being sold. If it's in the airport in Washington, D.C., that's pretty right in your face there. And he also said that he had a patient that texted him and said that it was a cancer patient. And she said, she wanted to know what his opinion was about using CBD along with her other treatment. And so he actually said, well, what does your doctor, your general practitioner say? And she said, well, he recommended it. He said, well, then you should go with that recommendation. So he acknowledged that there's some. I mean, it's the biggest thing that I got out of it is he said we're not going to be able to say you can't use these products. Now that's what the rest of the agency needs to get caught up on, because the reality is we know these products are out there. They're not going away. There's millions of Americans that are using them, that want to use them, and the FDA needs to get up to speed to start regulating this. And then if they want to fill in the data gaps, that's what he talked about, was that they need more information to understand this better. Great, let's work with the, FDA and the industry should work together to fill in those gaps and figure this out. But they should stop trying to, put out these statements to scare people and kill the market. So part of the reason FDA is concerned, there are quality concerns out there. There's some data that's been out there in different studies where people went out and pulled CBD products right off the shelf. They went and tested them. Some of them didn't come out to have as much CBD as they said. Some of them didn't barely have any. Some of them had too much. So the accuracy in that production process of, putting out a product and accurately labeling is important. And there were other concerns too with the quality. Again, you can't make this in your kitchen and sell it to the general public. It's just not, it's not the way that the federal law allows for it. So we have to make sure that we're meeting the quality standards as an industry as well. Regulatory path. So I mentioned whole plant extracts are not identical. There is a path for these. The research shows that these concerns are not as big of a deal as FDA thinks they are, and they should issue an interim rule and allow an exception for these extracts. This is our recommendation that we sent to them last year when they asked for comments, and we think they should allow for dosages up to 50 milligrams for a recommended dosage through over-the-counter supplement sales. So I'm going to throw out a few predictions, go out a little bit on a limb here. We already talked about the overproduction. There are over 17,000 licensees. I think we're going to see some of that come down. There is an indication a lot of people still want to grow this crop, but the market is not growing at the pace that it was. And so I also think we'll see the acreage drop a little bit for the first time since we've seen hemp grown in the United States. Not dramatically, but I think we will see it come down some. Right now, for the near term, the biomass prices, I just don't see where they go up. I mean, I say in here maybe up to 150. That's optimistic thinking here. Realistically, there's no reason to think that they're going to go up. I mean, the economists here are sharing their information, and they know more than I do about this. But that's what I see. I don't see anything driving us up on the price yet. And then I think farmers are going to start looking at other things that we can do with hemp. This is a really diverse crop. The grain has got a lot of potential. Eventually the fiber, we need processors to do that. And FDA, I actually wrote this before the comments. I don't know how long it's going to take for them to wake up, but I think we still have a road with FDA. They're a slow agency to move on things like this. And we're going to hope that USDA can make some changes to the interim final rule to fix this so that we can have a successful season in 2021 as well. So one last thing here, just some hemp product sales. You can sort of see this was an estimate here of where we are for the overall market, not just CBD, but where it's headed on an estimate basis to about $2.6 billion by 2022. That came from Hemp Business Journal, good source. And last thing, what do we need for success? Regulatory certainty from FDA, reasonable sampling and testing regulations from USDA, stable hemp genetics. We got to work on the genetics and get these, get genetics that farmers can depend on. Investments in more hemp processing, probably more so on the grain and fiber side especially. Updated state legislation and some banking guidance as well as transportation. So that's I mentioned that on our website we have some interesting reports and things. If you haven't already checked it out, you might want to go in there and consider signing up for our newsletter. So thanks.